I'm about to show you exactly how to protect your phone in case of a tsunami, because we're testing cheap versus expensive waterproof phone pouches. We kept both pouches submerged underwater for about 5 minutes. Then, to simulate movement underwater, we grabbed the strings on each pouch and moved them both up and down. Now we're testing how well you could use the phones through the screen protector. And they both seem to be working just perfectly. Now we're going to check for any leakage. The phone was perfectly dry and the pouch had no water inside. Now to test the leakage on the cheap pouch. And again, no water and no leakage. Now let's talk about the prices. For the cheap, you're going to be paying around $10, while for the expensive, you're going to be paying around $37. Overall, seeing that both pouches performed perfectly, it feels like a no-brainer to go with the cheap. So cheap wins. We're testing cheap versus expensive shop vacs. We're starting with the speed sucking test, and as you can see, the expensive takes the win here pretty quickly. Now for the liquids test, you can see the expensive gets a strong start here but can't seem to get the whole tip inside of the cup, and the cheap comes in for the win. Finally, for the blowing test, you can see the expensive by a landslide takes this victory.
Expensive one! Cheap versus expensive hand soap.
To test the soaps, we did 2 full squirts on each hand. Then we had him put each hand into water for 30 seconds and scrub away as much of the dirt and grime as he could. And here are the results.
And it's a tie!
Have you ever wondered how to tell cheap versus expensive paper towels? Well, here's how. First, we're going to conduct a couple tests. We'll start with the absorption test. First is the cheap paper towel. You can tell near the end here, it just could not absorb all the liquid. The expensive definitely has better absorption. And the difference is clear as day. Now to test their strength. We're slowly adding more water and weight onto the paper towels until one breaks. After adding 4 quarters on each one, it seemed like both were holding up pretty well. So we added a little extra pressure on each side until one ripped, which almost immediately happened. I was a little skeptical on how much pressure he was putting down, so I wanted to try it myself. And as you could tell, the bounty was a lot stronger.
And expensive wins! We're testing cheap versus expensive heat guns.
We set both heat guns to full blast to see which cheese stick melts faster. After about a minute, you can see the cheap takes the victory. Now for the same test, but with some chocolate. After only about 15 seconds, you can see the expensive heat gun make the chocolate melt over. And finally, the temperature test. In only about 30 seconds, the cheap heat gun took the temperature above 600 degrees, which is the maximum for the thermometer. Even after about a minute, the expensive heat gun could not get the temperature above 600.
After the 3 tests, it seems like the cheap one has definitely taken a little bit more of the edge. So comparing the prices, you're going to be paying $20 to $30 for the expensive one and around $15 to $20 for the cheap one. So all in all, it seems like the cheap one is going to be more affordable and a little bit better for the price. And cheap wins!
Have you ever wanted to cook a meal like a top-tier chef? Well, it all starts with knowing how to pick your butter. So we're testing cheap versus expensive butters. First, we're starting off with the melting test. Now for the expensive. So after a minute, you could tell the expensive on the right held together a little better. Now for the spread test. The expensive was a little harder to spread, but still worked. And the cheap was spreading smooth like butter. Now for the taste test. Now he has to choose which is cheap and which is expensive.
Expensive cheap.
Yep, that's the one.
And expensive wins! Cheap versus expensive.
Let's start with the density test. The weight sunk instantly to the bottom of the cheap, while in the expensive, it was much more dense. Now for the taste test. We started with the expensive. Just based off the cheap being a little more watery than the expensive, it was pretty easy to guess.
This one is cheap, the other one is expensive.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, you got it. Nice.
And expensive wins!